Okay, Early Christianity, A Brief Examination, Part 2. I hope you already seen Part 1. If not, I suggest you go back and see it because I'm just going to jump right off into this one. We're going to start this video off with a guy named Josephus, right? Now, Josephus, hold on, forgive me. Josephus lived from around 37 AD to 100 AD, and keeping in vein with how we were keeping chronological tabs on the birth of these individuals, keeping in the same vein that we used for the first video. Josephus would have been born 4 years after the death of Christ. Okay, so in his book Antiquities of the Jews, he has a section in it where he actually mentions Jesus. Now, there's a lot of people who say that that's an interpolation. It's fake. It's not legit. And there are some people that say it was legit. Josephus wrote it. And so what they're saying by interpolation is they're saying that someone who lived a long time after Josephus was already dead inserted that into his work to make it appear as if Josephus said that. And so you have some evidence for that. You have some evidence for why people feel like it's real. So you may want to look into that yourself. We're not gonna try to come to a definite conclusion on that right now for this video. But we are going to look at what Josephus in the Antiquities of the Jews, his work Antiquities of the Jews, what he said about Jesus. And then you can, after you're aware of the information, you can verify whether it was, real or fake. Now, there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. For he appeared to them alive again the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day. So they kind of hit everything. The resurrection, the crucifixion, the Jesus may be a deity because he said if it be lawful to call him a man. He says he was a doer of wonderful works, so they talking about the miracles. They basically hit all of the high notes of Christianity. So, but even if someone put that in later, it's still in the vein of early Christianity because the mindset of somebody who decided to put that in a couple of centuries later, they're trying to, if this is the case, they're trying to manipulate the view of what's Christian, right? But what the thing about it is, I've always heard people debating this about Josephus, but it wasn't until I bought the book and read it for myself that I found out there was some more things in Josephus that I hadn't heard were being debated. That, hey, look, man, Josephus mentions James, the brother of Jesus, as well. So I didn't really hear him saying that was interpolation, but if that's in the book, you got to deal with that. So in the same book, Antiquities of the Jews, I want to show y'all something. Josephus mentions James, the brother of Jesus, right? So he says, Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but upon the road. So he assembled the Sanhedrin of the judges, and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others, or some of his companions. Okay? And brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James. Josephus, this was on page 423. And you want to know something even crazier? So he mentions Jesus, interpolation, mentions James, the brother of Jesus, interpolation, it all could be, tell me, trust me. But then he mentions John the Baptist. I never heard anybody say that before. Right? I never heard anybody say that before. And I was like, wow, wait a minute. It's a lot of stuff inside of Josephus that we might need to take a look at. Because even if it is interpolation, what I'm saying is, who are these people trying to control the narrative, right? By trying to manipulate history. Now, some of the Jews thought that the destruction of Herod's army came from God, and that very justly as a punishment of what he did against John, that was called the Baptist, for Herod slew him, who was a good man, and commanded the Jews to exercise virtue, both as to righteousness towards one another and piety towards God, and so to come to baptism, for that the washing with water would be acceptable to him, if they made use of it, not in order to the putting away or the remission of some sins only, but for the purification of the body, supposing still that the soul was thoroughly purified beforehand by righteousness. Now when many others came to crowd about him, for they were greatly moved or pleased by hearing his word, Herod, who feared lest the great influence John had over the people might put it into his power and inclination to raise a rebellion, for they seemed ready to do anything he should advise, thought it best, by putting him to death, to prevent any mischief he might cause, and not bring himself into difficulties by sparing a man who might make him repent of it when it should be too late. Accordingly, he was sent a prisoner out of Herod's suspicious temper to Machaerus, the castle I before mentioned, and was there put to death. Now the Jews had an opinion that the destruction of this army was sent as a punishment upon Herod, and a mark of God's displeasure against him. So you got a guy named John baptizing people, being killed by Herod, having a whole lot of influence. He was called a Baptist. Yeah. So he's either talking about these people, or somebody later is trying to make it seem like he's talking about these people. Either way, it's important to early Christianity to show, right? To show that there were pockets of these Christians in various places, and they all didn't agree, right? They all didn't believe and teach the exact same thing. Okay, you know, that's why it was over caught the superstition. It wasn't clear. Okay, so what we're gonna hit next? We're gonna go right here to the Gospel of Judas, right? And only reason why I'm gonna go to Gospel of Judas is I want to just illustrate some of the differences, the discrepancies. Okay, because in the Gospel of Judas, you almost get the vibe that Judas didn't really sell out Jesus, that it was all part of the divine plan for Judas to do that, and he was just doing what he was supposed to do, right? But you actually got, you know, the Gospel of Judas, where it says the secret word of declaration by which Jesus spoke in conversation with Judas Iscariot during 8 days, 3 days before he celebrated Passover. When he appeared on earth, he performed miracles and great wonders for the salvation of humanity. And since some walked in the way of righteousness, while others walked in their transgression, the 12 disciples were called. He began to speak with them about the mysteries beyond the world and what would take place at the end. So that's how the Gospel of Judas start out, just like a lot of these other books in the Bible, right? And so on page 35 in the translation that I have, it says Jesus basically challenges the disciples to see who's, you know, strong enough, or the perfect human, he calls it, to stand before him, Jesus. You know, and none of them had enough strength to do it but Judas. Judas stood up to him, but he couldn't look him in his eyes, and he was looking away. And so this is the conversation that they had after Judas was the only one who was strong enough to stand before the Christ. But their spirits could not find the courage to stand before him, except for Judas Iscariot. He was able to stand before him, but he could not look him in the eyes, and he turned his face away. Judas said to him, I know who you are and where you have come from. You have come from the immortal Aeon of Barbello, and I am not worthy to utter the name of the one who has sent you. And knowing that Judas was reflecting upon something that was exalted, Jesus said to him, step away from the others, and I shall tell you the mysteries of the kingdom. Not so that you will go there, but you will grieve a great deal. For someone else will replace you, in order that the 12 disciples may again come to completion with their God. Right? And so what you see happening is the idea of Jesus telling them up front, that, hey, you're going to lose your spot amongst the 12. Somebody else going to replace you. Remember, because Judas committed suicide, and then they had to pick who was going to be the other 12 disciple to take his place. That's in the King James version of the Bible that you have. That's in the canon that you have. But then you have a alternate version that was kind of left out. You also have books like written like in the New Testament, where you have epistles. Epistles are a letter. So when you have like 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Ephesians, Galatians, Philippians, Colossians, those are the names of cities. Colossians is a city. Thessalonica, Ephesus, Rome, Corinth, Corinthians, Corinth. These are places where letters were written to, and the majority of those letters was letters that Paul was writing to these different places. But like I told you, it was groups of these early Christians in various places. Now, they all didn't think the same thing. They all didn't teach the same thing. So if you notice in the Bible, it's almost like they're trying to reaffirm what it is that you're supposed to be doing and what it is that you are not supposed to be doing. Trying to correct the various groups and churches all around. So, but those letters weren't the only letters that were being written back and forth amongst these early Christians, right? So, we have one guy, a man named Ignatius, right? Ignatius, he lived from around like 34 to 108, 35 to 108 AD. Okay, around the same time as Josephus kind of looked like, but he has a letter, Now, like I said, they always gonna debate whether it's authentic or not, so we're not doing that here. But it was a letter to Magnesia, the Magnesians, the city or whatever, Magnesia, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, but look what he says, and now I'm showing y'all that there were definitely Christians. There were various ones all around. They didn't all believe the same thing. We understand that. Just stay with where I'm at with early Christians. They didn't all believe the same thing. I'm gonna show you what these Christians felt like. Okay. Be not deceived with strange doctrines, nor with old fables which are unprofitable. For if we still continue to live according to the Jewish law, we do confess ourselves not to have received grace. For even the most holy prophets lived according to Christ Jesus. So what you're going to see in this letter from Ignatius to Magnesius is there was a faction of Christians who totally wanted to break from the old law. He said, be not deceived with strange doctrines, nor with old fables, which are unprofitable. For if we still continue to live according to the Jewish law, we do confess ourselves not to have received grace. So we still live by the Jewish law. We haven't received any grace, right? But it goes, don't think that's all that he says. Wherefore, if they, this is verse 3, wherefore, if they who were brought up in these ancient laws came nevertheless to the newness of hope, no longer observing Sabbaths, but keeping the Lord's day, in which also our life is sprung up by him, and through his death, whom yet some deny. So here they saying they abolished observing the Sabbath, and that they keep the Lord's day. No longer observing Sabbaths, but keeping the Lord's day. Okay. He also goes on to say that verse 9 and 11. Lay aside therefore the old and sour and evil leaven, and be ye changed into the new leaven, which is Jesus Christ. It is absurd to name Jesus Christ and to Judas, for the Christian religion did not embrace the Jewish, but the Jewish the Christian, that so every tongue that believed might be gathered together unto God. These things, my beloved, I write unto you, not that I know of any among you that lie under this error, But as one of the least among you, I am desirous to forewarn you that ye fall not into the snares of false doctrine. Okay, now I see we getting right around at 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to wrap, 15 minutes, so I'm trying to wrap this up. But false doctrine, so the Jewish religion was false doctrine to these Christians. And real quick, this same guy also wrote a letter to the Smyrnians, another Greek city. A lot of these are Greek cities, but this is like quite possibly the first mention of the Catholic Church. So this guy, this Christian, I think he was a Catholic, but I'm just showing you his differences, right? Just follow with the early Christianity, a brief examination. I'm showing you something. Wheresoever the bishop shall appear, there let, and this is the letter to the Smyrnians, chapter 3, verse 4 and 5. Wheresoever the bishop shall appear, there let the people also be. As where Jesus Christ is, there is the Catholic Church. Bam, Catholic Church. So I'm showing you the first mention of the Catholic Church, right? In some of these documents. Okay, so I'm gonna do another part to this, but just go back and watch part 1 if you haven't. Now you watch part 2. So we building it up. They were definitely there. They definitely did not believe and accept the same things. That's the key. So you got to look into these other texts to kind of see what was really going on for one. Also, to try to ascertain who believed what, and then you got to see what was actually accurate and what was made up. Brief early Christianity, a brief examination, part 2. I'll be coming back with part 3.